The coffee shop smelled of burnt espresso and rain-soaked winter coats. Emma Hartley slouched in the corner booth like she was trying to disappear into the cracked leather. Her gray sweatshirt, 3 sizes too large, and faded to something between ash and regret. The sleeves hung past her wrists. A stain shaped like Italy marked the left knee of her jeans. Spaghetti sauce from a dinner she'd rather forget, back when she still cooked for someone who claimed to love her. No makeup. That had been deliberate. Hair yanked into a knot so messy it looked accidental, which was the point. Her phone sat face down on the table, Sarah's latest text burning through the screen like an accusation she hadn't answered yet. Outside, snow fell in thick curtains over Portland, turning the January afternoon into something hushed and gray. Tuesday. The kind of day people spent avoiding their lives, which made it perfect for this disaster Sarah had talked her into after 6 months of relentless campaigning disguised as friendship. Emma checked the time. 5 minutes late. Maybe he wouldn't show. Maybe she could slip out the back door, text some excuse about a sick cat. Sherlock actually was wheezing this morning, and go home to grade papers and pretend she hadn't agreed to this humiliation. The door chimed. She glanced up, expecting khakis and a forgettable face. Someone Sarah worked with who was nice enough but wouldn't make Emma's chest hurt with the effort of pretending she believed in second chances. The man who walked in wore a suit that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. Charcoal gray, cut so precisely it looked like architecture. Tall enough that he had to duck slightly through the doorway, dark hair touched with silver at the temples. In that way, men got to call distinguished while women just called old. He moved like someone who'd never questioned whether a room would make space for him. Emma's stomach dropped. Wrong person. Had to be. This man was meeting someone else, probably someone in heels and pearls waiting at a table by the window. But his eyes found hers across the coffee shop, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe relief, and he walked directly toward her booth. Her first thought was that Sarah had made a terrible mistake. Her second thought was that she needed to leave immediately before this stranger realized he was in the wrong place, and she had to watch his face change from polite confusion to barely disguised disappointment. He stopped at her table, and up close she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that came from squinting at too many contracts, or maybe just from carrying weight no one else could see. His voice came out warm, textured like good whiskey left too long in the glass. "Emma, I'm Daniel Harrison." "Daniel." "Sarah said you'd be in the corner booth." Emma's mouth went dry. This couldn't be right. Sarah had described her blind date as a nice guy from work who was recently single and could use a friend. Recent and single were the only descriptors, delivered with Sarah's trademark vagueness that usually meant the guy was decent but unremarkable. This man looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread on how the other half lived. She glanced down at her disaster of a sweatshirt and wanted the booth to swallow her whole. "That's me," she forced the words out. "You can sit if you want, or not. I mean, if you need to leave, I totally understand." His smile widened, and she caught a glimpse of a dimple in his left cheek, something boyish that softened all that expensive polish. "Why would I leave? I just got here." He slid into the booth across from her with an ease that made her even more conscious of her own discomfort, her spine rigid against the cracked leather like she was bracing for impact. "I have to say, Sarah didn't mention you had the most expressive eyes I've ever seen. They're remarkable." Emma blinked. The compliment felt genuine, which made it worse somehow. "Are you sure you have the right Emma? Emma Hartley works at Lincoln Elementary as a third-grade teacher?" Lincoln Elementary. He leaned back slightly, completely relaxed in a way she envied. "Loves murder mystery podcasts, has a cat named Sherlock, and makes the best chocolate chip cookies in 3 counties, according to Sarah." "That's what I was told." The cookie thing intrigued me most, I have to admit. Despite herself, Emma felt a small smile tugging at her lips. Sarah talks too much. Sarah is thorough. There's a difference. A barista appeared at their table with a practiced smile, and Danielle ordered black coffee before turning to Emma with a question in the tilt of his head. She asked for a chai latte and immediately regretted it. Too specific, too pretentious when regular coffee would have been fine. But he didn't seem to notice her care, just nodded his thanks as the barista retreated. "I have a confession to make." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since he'd walked in, he looked uncertain. I told Sarah not to describe me to you. I asked her to keep it vague. Emma's defenses snapped back into place. Here it comes, she thought. The polite exit, the "you seem nice but" speech, the inevitable disappointment she'd been bracing for since she'd agreed to this disaster. But Daniel kept talking. I've had some experiences with women who were more interested in my bank account than in me. Gets exhausting, pretending you don't notice when someone's eyes light up at the mention of your job title rather than something you have actually said. Emma studied him carefully. There was something genuine in the weariness around his eyes, a bone-deep tiredness she recognized from her own mirror on the bad mornings when Kyle's betrayal felt fresh instead of 3 years old. Sarah didn't tell me anything except that you were single and could use a friend. Emma heard the words coming out more bitter than intended. I almost canceled 3 times. I'm not really in a dating place right now. Or ever again, possibly. She gestured at her sweatshirt like it was evidence. Bad breakup. Theft and abandonment combo special. Sorry, I'm not usually this cynical. Or this underdressed. Full disclosure, I dress like this on purpose. I've been sabotaging my own dates for 6 months. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that made a few other patrons glance over. That's brilliant. Wish I'd thought of it. I once wore a fake mustache to a set-up dinner. Didn't work, she complimented it. Emma couldn't help but laugh. You did not. I absolutely did. Very dignified mustache. Made me look like a Victorian gentleman, or so I told myself. He accepted his coffee from the returning barista with a quiet thank you. The relationship lasted 3 weeks before she asked if I'd consider investing in her friend's cryptocurrency startup. That's when I knew the mustache had failed its mission. The conversation flowed easier after that, the tension bleeding out of Emma's shoulders as they talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Daniel asked about her students, and Emma found herself telling stories she usually saved for other teachers. The daily drama of 8-year-olds navigating playground politics and the pure chaos of teaching fractions to children who couldn't sit still. He listened like she was describing something fascinating instead of mundane elementary school life, asking follow-up questions that proved he was actually paying attention. When she asked about his work, he described corporate consulting with enough self-deprecating humor that it almost sounded adventurous, though she noticed he kept things vague, never quite specifying what his company actually did. The coffee shop began its closing routine around them, chairs stacked on tables in the periphery, the hiss of the espresso machine going quiet. Emma glanced at her phone and startled at the time. 2 hours had vanished like smoke. I should probably go. She reached for her purse, suddenly aware of how much she didn't want this to end. I have lesson plans to finish. Daniel's expression shifted into something hopeful and hesitant at once. Can I see you again? Maybe somewhere you feel comfortable dressing however you want, though I have to say that sweatshirt is growing on me. Every instinct Emma had carefully constructed over 3 years of self-preservation screamed at her to say no, to protect herself, to not risk another heartbreak when the last one had nearly destroyed her. But there was something about Daniel that felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her ratty clothes and messy hair and smiled like she was exactly what he'd hoped to find. Maybe it was the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about women who only saw his wallet. Maybe it was just the dangerous flutter in her chest that felt like hope. Okay, the word came out quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise of the coffee shop shutting down around them. But I choose the place, and I'm paying for myself. Daniel stood and offered his hand to help her up. She took it, felt the warmth of his palm against hers, calluses she hadn't expected on someone who looked like he'd never done manual labor in his life. Deal. They walked to the door together, and he held it open, snow swirling into the warm space behind them. Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, Sarah probably demanding details, but she ignored it, too busy watching Daniel's profile in the streetlight glow, the way snow caught in his hair like stars. What Emma didn't know as she walked to the bus stop alone, Daniel's goodbye still warm on her lips, was that the man she just agreed to see again was worth $2.7 billion. That his consulting firm was actually Harrison Capital, an investment empire with offices scattered across 4 continents. That he was a widower raising a 6-year-old daughter alone, his wife dead 4 years from cancer that took 18 months to kill her. That the careful vagueness about his work wasn't modesty, but self-protection. Learn it hard after women who saw dollar signs instead of a person. All Emma knew, standing at the bus stop watching snow fall over Portland, was that for the first time in 3 years she felt something that might have been hope, and that terrified her more than any amount of money ever could. The library smelled like old paper and possibility. Emma stood outside Portland Public Library's used book sale, checking her reflection in the glass doors and wondering when she'd started caring about first impressions again. 20 minutes in her closet that morning, cycling through outfits like they mattered, before settling on dark jeans without stains and the cream sweater Sarah had given her last Christmas. Minimal makeup, hair actually brushed instead of yanked into submission. Sherlock had watched the entire production with judgmental green eyes, and Emma had told the cat she was allowed to care a little bit. 3 dates in 6 years, she could put in effort for 3 dates. Daniel was already waiting, leaning against the brick facade in dark jeans and a forest green Henley that made his eyes look darker. When he saw her, his face did something that made Emma's stomach flip, pure, uncomplicated pleasure at her existence. You came, like he'd doubted, which seemed impossible for someone who looked like that. I said I would. Emma adjusted her purse strap, nervous energy needing somewhere to go. Plus, I never missed this sale. Last year I found a first edition Agatha Christie for $3. The cat's namesake. The very same. They spent 2 hours wandering through tables of books, their conversation picking up exactly where the coffee shop had left it off. Easy and natural, like they'd known each other longer than one afternoon. Daniel had an unexpected passion for maritime disasters. Titanic, Lusitania, the Edmund Fitzgerald. And Emma introduced him to her favorite mystery authors, the ones Sarah called her guilty pleasure reads. My grandmother got me hooked. Emma held up a dog-eared Ngaio Marsh novel, its spine cracked from multiple readings. She used to say that mystery novels taught you the most important life skill, paying attention to what people don't say. Daniel paused at a table of old postcards and photographs. Portland Harbor in the 1950s, rendered in faded color. Wise woman. My grandfather taught me something similar, but about business. He said the best deals happen when you listen more than you talk. Emma's question slipped out before she could stop it. Is that how you became successful? Sarah mentioned you do well. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a guardedness sliding into place like a door closing. Sarah has a generous definition of doing well. But yes, I've been fortunate. He picked up the postcard, studied it with more attention than it deserved. My grandfather started with a small accounting office. Very humble beginnings. He taught me that money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it and who you become in the process. There was careful neutrality in his tone that made Emma wonder what he wasn't saying, but she didn't push. She had her own secrets, her own carefully guarded wounds that she wasn't ready to expose to daylight. They left the library with small stacks of books each, and Daniel suggested lunch at a diner 2 blocks away. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since Reagan's first term, and Emma loved it immediately. Over burgers and milkshakes, Daniel asked about her ex-fiancé. The question was gentle but direct, no dancing around the subject like most people did. Kyle. Emma dragged a French fry through ketchup, didn't eat it. We were together 4 years, engaged for 6 months. I thought I knew him. The words tasted bitter even 3 years later. Turns out he'd been unemployed 8 months and didn't tell me. Took out credit cards in my name, emptied our joint savings account, left a note saying he needed to find himself. Found himself in Costa Rica with his yoga instructor, apparently. Emma finally ate the French fry. The worst part wasn't the money, though, that hurt. It was realizing I'd been so blind. I teach 8-year-olds to recognize patterns and solve problems, but I couldn't see what was happening in my own life. Made me question everything about my judgment. Daniel reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. You weren't blind. He was a skilled liar. There's a difference. Emma met his eyes. What about you? Sarah said you're recently single too. Daniel's jaw tightened and something hardened in his expression. Not exactly recent. My wife Rebecca died 4 years ago. Breast cancer. 18-month battle. Emma's chest constricted. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Sarah didn't tell you because I asked her not to. Daniel's voice went rough around the edges. I hate when people's first impression of me is widower. Like that defines me. He stared at his untouched milkshake. Rebecca was everything. We were college sweethearts. Built a life together, made plans for decades we'd never get. When she got sick, I watched her fight with everything she had, and I couldn't save her. All the money in the world, and I couldn't save her. Emma's voice came out gentle. You were there, that's what mattered. Some days I'm not sure that was enough. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief that looked different but felt the same. People they'd loved who'd left craters in their lives, one through betrayal and one through biology's cruel randomness. Daniel took a breath like he was steadying himself. Emma, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned at the coffee shop, but I was enjoying being just Daniel for a while. Emma's heart sank. Here it comes. The deal breaker, the complication, the reason this couldn't possibly work. I'm not just successful. Daniel met her eyes square on. I'm very wealthy. My grandfather's accounting firm. I grew it into Harrison Capital, investment firm. We have offices in New York, London, Singapore, Hong Kong. The firm manages about 40 billion in assets. He paused and Emma watched him gather courage for the next part. And personally, I'm worth about $2.7 billion. The word billion hung in the air between them like something physical. Emma's mind went completely blank for 3 seconds, then started racing so fast she couldn't catch a single coherent thought. Billion, not million. Billion with a B. The number was so large it didn't feel real, couldn't be attached to the man sitting across from her eating a burger at a diner with cracked vinyl booths. I can see you processing that. Daniel's voice came from far away. I should have told you sooner, but I was enjoying being just Daniel for a while. Not Daniel Harrison of Harrison Capital. Just me. Emma's voice came out higher than normal. Harrison Capital, the one renovating the waterfront? That owns half the buildings downtown? Technically, the buildings don't have my name on them. Daniel looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since she'd met him. The company does. This is why I don't lead with it. Everything changes. People start calculating net worth instead of listening to what I'm saying. Emma sat back in the booth, her mind reeling. Sarah hadn't just set her up with her boss. She'd set her up with one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast. And Emma had shown up to their first date in a stained sweatshirt like some kind of deranged test he had somehow passed. I need a minute. Emma stood abruptly, the booth's edge catching her hip. I'm not leaving. I just need to breathe. She walked to the bathroom on legs that didn't feel entirely connected to her body, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at herself in the mirror above the chipped porcelain sink. I'm a third-grade teacher who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and considers splurging when I buy name-brand cereal. He's a billionaire, actual billionaire. The math doesn't work. But then she thought about his laugh, the way he'd listened to her stories about 8-year-olds like they mattered more than quarterly earnings, the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about Rebecca, about being unable to save her despite having enough money to buy hospitals. Emma returned to the table. Daniel was staring at his untouched milkshake like it held answers, and when he looked up at her, his expression was so openly anxious it made her chest ache. I'm not good at this. Emma slid back into the booth. I don't know how to date someone who probably has a private jet. 3, actually. Daniel winced. Sorry, bad joke. Terrible joke. Inappropriate joke. Despite everything, Emma laughed. The absurdity of it. 3 private jets like that was something people just casually mentioned over diner food. Melissa, Daniel's voice went serious. I don't want you to think about any of that. I just want to spend time with someone who sees me, not my bank account. Can we try that? Emma took a deep breath. I'm terrible at pretending things don't exist. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to get to know me before deciding what the money means. His eyes held something that looked like pleading. I like you, Emma. I like that you dressed in your worst sweatshirt to try to scare me off. I like that you're honest and don't play games. I like that you're sitting here telling me you're terrible at this instead of pretending it's not complicated. Emma felt something settle in her chest, a decision forming before she'd consciously made it. Okay, but I have conditions. Name them. We split everything. I'm not comfortable with you paying for everything all the time. It feels like a power imbalance. Daniel started to protest and Emma held up her hand. I know it's not rational, but it's important to me. Agreed, though I reserve the right to occasionally bring you coffee. We take this slow. Glacially slow. I need time to figure out if this is real or if I'm just dazzled by the impossible fairy tale of it all. I can do slow. Daniel's voice went soft. Though for the record, I'm the one who feels like I'm in a fairy tale. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone genuine? Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. Complete honesty. No more surprises about who you are or what your life looks like. Deal. They finished their lunch, the tension easing back into comfortable conversation. Though Emma caught herself looking at Daniel differently now, trying to square the man across from her with the abstract concept of billions, and failing completely. As they walked back to their cars, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at it and grimaced. I have to take this. Business crisis. Can I call you later? Sure. Emma watched him walk away, phone pressed to his ear, his entire demeanor shifting into something more authoritative. The billionaire CEO, she realized. The man who ran an empire. And somehow, impossibly, he wanted to date her. Her phone buzzed. Sarah's text. Tell me everything. Emma smiled despite the chaos in her head, typed back, You have so much explaining to do. What Emma didn't know as she drove home in her 12-year-old Honda with the temperamental transmission was that the business crisis on Daniel's phone was his brother Ryan demanding to know why Daniel was wasting time with some nobody teacher when there were appropriate women who understood his world, or that Daniel had told Ryan to mind his own business in language colorful enough to make a sailor blush, or that the real test wasn't whether Emma could handle Daniel's wealth, it was whether she could handle everyone else's reaction to it. 6 weeks passed like something out of a dream Emma kept expecting to wake from. Date 3 at Powell's City of Books. 3 floors of wall-to-wall literature where Daniel bought her a first edition mystery for $45, and she insisted on paying for their coffee afterward. Date 4 at Saturday Market, wandering through artisan stalls while Emma introduced him to Portland's quirky underbelly, and she didn't notice the photographer capturing them from 20 feet away. Date 5 at her apartment, Emma cooking pasta in her tiny kitchen while Sherlock the cat regarded Daniel with deep suspicion, and afterward they'd washed dishes together and kissed for the first time against the counter, slow and careful like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Date 6 hiking at Columbia River Gorge, where Daniel told her about his childhood, his grandfather's small accounting firm, the lessons in humility and hard work that shaped him, his father's death when Daniel was 15 and suddenly responsible for holding his family together. Emma shared about her parents in Idaho, her father's calloused electrician hands and her mother's nursing scrubs, why teaching mattered more to her than money ever could. They talked about values and found themselves aligned in ways that felt improbable given the gulf in their bank accounts. Date 7 at Crystal Ballroom for an indie band Emma loved. Daniel slightly out of his element, but game, and neither of them noticed the tabloid photographer who caught them in profile, Emma's head on Daniel's shoulder during a slow song. The article dropped on a Monday morning like a bomb through Emma's carefully reconstructed life. Her phone started buzzing at 6 a.m., texts piling up faster than she could read them. Sarah's came first. Don't look at social media. Just don't. Looked. The headline stared back from her cracked phone screen. Billionaire Daniel Harrison's new flame. Elementary school teacher or gold digger in disguise. The article was everything Emma had feared condensed into 800 words of speculation and insinuation. Photos of them together, Emma always dressed down, Daniel always polished, positioned like evidence of some grand scheme. Her apartment building with its peeling paint and broken security light, captioned modest living for now in a tone that made her skin crawl. Her engagement announcement to Kyle from 3 years ago, somehow dug up from newspaper archives and presented as proof of a pattern, targeting successful men. An anonymous source, and Emma's money was on someone in Daniel's inner circle, speculated about her motives, her character, whether she deliberately sought him out through Sarah. The comment section was worse, strangers dissecting her worth as a human being based on her tax bracket, and her decision to date someone whose tax bracket had more zeros than seemed reasonable. Emma's principal called her into the office before first period. The conversation was careful, loaded with unspoken concern about how this situation might affect the school's reputation. Parents were already asking questions during drop-off, and the principal needed to ensure this wouldn't become a distraction from Emma's professional responsibilities. Emma sat in the uncomfortable chair across from the principal's desk and felt her career, the one thing Kyle hadn't managed to destroy, trembling under the weight of public scrutiny she'd never asked for. Daniel called during her lunch period. Emma stood in her empty classroom, surrounded by 8-year-olds' artwork about gratitude, and tried to keep her voice steady. Have you seen the articles? All of them. Daniel sounded exhausted in a way she hadn't heard before. I'm so sorry, Em. I've had my PR team contact the major outlets, but these gossip sites don't care about truth. They care about clicks. A photographer followed me to Safeway this morning, Daniel. Emma's voice cracked despite her best efforts. Parents are staring at me during drop-off. My principal is worried about the school's reputation. This is my workplace. I can't have this chaos in my life. I know. I'm trying to fix it. How? Emma heard the desperation in her own voice. How do you fix strangers deciding I'm a gold digger? How do you fix people thinking they know everything about me based on my apartment building and my salary? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Come to dinner at my family's house this weekend. Meet Ryan and my mother. Let them see you're real. Once they know you, support you, the narrative changes. Emma laughed, a bitter sound that tasted wrong. What if they hate me? What if they agree with the tabloids? They won't. But Daniel's voice carried warning. I need to tell you, Ryan can be difficult, protective. He's been suspicious of everyone I've dated since Rebecca died. And my mother has high standards. But Emma, if you show them who you really are, they'll see what I see. Emma stared out her classroom window at the playground where children were playing foursquare, their lives uncomplicated by wealth and public opinion and the weight of other people's judgment. Okay, but Daniel, if your family hates me, I'm leaving and we're ordering pizza instead. Deal. The relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you for giving us a chance. After they hung up, Emma sat on her classroom floor surrounded by construction paper and glitter from the morning's art project and tried to imagine a world where Daniel Harrison's mother looked at a third-grade teacher from Idaho and saw someone worthy of her billionaire son. The email arrived Friday night, 2 days before the dinner. Emma was grading papers on her couch, Sherlock purring in her lap, when her phone chimed with a notification from an address she didn't recognize. The photos loaded slowly, her ancient phone struggling with the file size. And when they finally appeared, Emma's breath caught in her throat. Daniel at charity galas and fundraisers, always with a different woman on his arm. Women in designer gowns that probably cost more than Emma's car, dripping in jewelry that caught the camera flash like small explosions. Their smiles practiced and perfect. The message was brief. These are the women who belong in his world. You're a placeholder. Leave before you embarrass yourself further. A friend. Emma stared at the photos until they blurred, her inadequacy rendered in high definition. She forwarded them to Daniel without commentary, too tired to pretend she wasn't spiraling. He called immediately. That's not a friend. His voice was tight with anger. That's someone who wants to hurt you. Emma, those photos are from years ago. Networking events, fundraisers where I was obligated to attend with whoever the event planner paired me with. They mean nothing. But they're right, aren't they? Emma heard her voice break. Those women look like they belong at your side. Designer dresses and perfect makeup and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check your bank account before buying groceries. I look like your charity case. You look like the woman I'm falling in love with. Daniel's voice went fierce. Fuck everyone else's opinion. You think I care about designer dresses? You think I want someone who knows which fork to use at a 7-course dinner but can't hold a genuine conversation? Emma, I've dated those women. They're exhausting, every word calculated, every gesture performative. You're real. You dress in sweatshirts because you don't care about impressing anyone. You bring me to diners instead of Michelin-starred restaurants. You make me laugh and challenge my assumptions and treat me like a person instead of a bank account. That's who you are. Not what you look like in photos next to women I barely remember. Emma realized she was crying, hot tears tracking down her face while Sherlock kneaded her lap in feline concern. I'm scared, Daniel. So am I. But I'd rather be scared together than safe alone. Come to dinner tomorrow. Let my family meet you. Then we'll figure out the rest. Emma agreed because she was too tired to do anything else. But after they hung up, she stared at the photos for another hour, memorizing every perfect dress and practiced smile, and wondered if love was always this much work or if she was just particularly bad at it. Harrison Estate sat in Portland's West Hills like a monument to old money, all stone and glass and manicured grounds that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Emma sat in Daniel's car in the circular driveway and felt panic claw up her throat. "I can't do this." Lily's small voice came from the back seat, where Daniel's daughter sat in a booster seat Emma hadn't known would be there. "Emma, I'll hold your hand." Emma turned to look at the little girl, 6 years old with dark hair like Daniel's, and eyes that held too much understanding for someone still losing baby teeth. "Thank you, sweetheart." Daniel put the car in park and turned to face her. "Look at me. You can do hard things. You've done harder. You survived, Kyle. You paid off $25,000 of debt that wasn't your fault. You walked into my life knowing I'm a billionaire and stayed anyway. This is just dinner." The housekeeper, a warm-faced woman named Mrs. Chen, greeted them at the door and led them to a sitting room that was bigger than Emma's entire apartment. Soaring ceilings, artwork that probably belonged in museums, furniture that looked too expensive to actually use. Catherine Harrison appeared like she'd been waiting just off stage. Silver hair perfectly styled, elegant in that effortless way of women who'd never worried about money, her eyes cool and assessing as they swept over Emma from head to toe. "Daniel, Lily, and you must be Emma." Emma offered her hand, trying to ignore how badly it was shaking. "Mrs. Harrison, it's lovely to meet you." Catherine's handshake was brief, formal, and cold enough to leave frost. "Daniel has told us very little about you. He's been quite secretive. Protective, not secretive." Daniel's voice carried an edge Emma hadn't heard before. "Given what happened with Victoria, I think my caution was warranted." Ryan Harrison entered like he owned the room, which he probably did partially. Younger than Daniel, but with the same sharp jawline, though where Daniel's eyes held warmth, Ryan's were calculating and cold. "So you're the teacher?" Ryan didn't offer his hand. "Interesting choice, Dan. Very unexpected." The formal dining room seated 20, but only 4 places were set, Lily having been swept away by Mrs. Chen to eat with the household staff. Emma sat across from Ryan, Catherine at the head of the table, Daniel beside her, radiating tension she could feel through the air. Catherine started the interrogation before the first course arrived. "Tell us about your family, Emma." "My parents live in Boise, Idaho." Emma kept her voice steady through force of will. "My father's a retired electrician. My mother was a nurse. I'm an only child." "And your education?" "Portland State, bachelor's in elementary education." Catherine's tone carried judgment so subtle it was almost deniable. "And you've been teaching how long?" 9 years, same school." Ryan leaned back in his chair with practiced casualness. "Must be quite a change dating Daniel. Different lifestyle than you're used to. It is different." Emma met his eyes, but Daniel is kind and thoughtful, which matters more than lifestyle. Still, Ryan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Must be tempting. The money, the access, the opportunities. "Ryan." Daniel's voice carried warning. Catherine cut in before the tension could escalate. "I'm curious about your engagement. What was his name? Kyle Brennan?" "That ended badly, I understand." Emma's blood went cold. They'd investigated her, dug into her past like she was a background check instead of a person. "Yes." Emma forced the word out. "Kyle defrauded me. I've been paying off the debt he left for 3 years. Ryan made a sympathetic noise that sounded rehearsed. $85,000. That's quite a burden. Must be difficult on a teacher's salary. Emma realized with sick certainty that they knew everything. Every credit card Kyle had opened in her name, every dollar she'd scraped together to pay back money she'd never spent, every sacrifice she'd made to rebuild credit he'd destroyed. Catherine's voice went soft with false concern. "Daniel has always been generous with those in need. I'm sure he's offered to help with that burden." The implication landed like a slap. "You're here for his money." Emma set down her fork with careful precision. She'd spent 6 weeks being polite, being quiet, trying not to make waves. That ended now. "Actually, Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison," her voice came out steady despite the fury underneath. "I didn't know who Daniel was when we met. Your employee Sarah set us up on a blind date. She described him as a nice guy from work who could use a friend. I showed up in my rattiest sweatshirt specifically to discourage any romantic interest because I've been avoiding dating since Kyle destroyed my credit and disappeared." The table went silent. What attracted me to Daniel? He listened when I talked about my students like their problems actually mattered. He made me laugh. He was kind to the barista. He didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing about wine or art or whatever else you all probably consider essential knowledge. Emma looked directly at Ryan, and honestly, I keep waiting for this to become less terrifying. But every day, there's a new article calling me a gold digger. Photographers outside my school, someone, apparently, investigating my finances like I'm a criminal. So forgive me if I'm not performing gratitude for the privilege of being interrogated over a meal I can't even pronounce. The silence stretched so long, Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Catherine's expression shifted, something that might have been respect flickering behind the cool assessment. Well, at least you have a spine. That's more than I can say for the last 3 women Daniel brought home. You should know that Ryan is protective of his brother, sometimes to the point of rudeness. Catherine turned to Emma like they were suddenly allies. He means well, even if his execution is terrible. I don't mean well. Ryan's voice had gone flat. I mean to protect family assets. I don't want Daniel's money. Emma felt exhaustion settle into her bones. I don't want his houses or his cars or whatever else comes with this life. I just want him. But I'm starting to wonder if that's even possible when everyone around him sees me as a threat or a transaction. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against expensive hardwood. We're leaving. Daniel, Catherine started. No. Daniel's voice was ice. Emma came here as a favor to me, to try to make this easier. Instead, she's been treated like an interloper in her own relationship. When you're ready to treat her with the respect she deserves, we'll try this again. Until then, we're done. He helped Emma out of her chair with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the fury in his voice. They left without another word. Daniel drove in silence for several minutes, his jaw so tight Emma could see the muscle jumping. She watched Portland lights blur past the window and tried to process what had just happened. Your brother hates me. My brother is an ass who thinks net worth determines human value. Daniel pulled over at a scenic overlook, the city spreading below them like scattered diamonds. He turned to face her, and Emma saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you. Emma's breath caught. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. Daniel's words came faster now, like a dam breaking. But sitting in that dining room, watching you stand up for yourself against my family, I realized I've never met anyone like you. You're not impressed by money or intimidated by it. You just see me. Emma felt tears start to track down her face. This is really hard, Daniel. I want to believe we can make this work, but you're scared, he finished for her. I am too. After Rebecca died, I swore I'd never risk my heart again. Built walls so high, I convinced myself they were protection instead of prison. Then you showed up in that ridiculous sweatshirt, and suddenly I wanted to try. What if your family never accepts me? Emma's voice broke. What if I'm always the teacher who doesn't belong? What if loving you means losing myself? Then we build our own family. Daniel reached across the console, took her hand in both of his. You, me, and Lily. Screw everyone else's opinions. Emma met his eyes in the dim light from the dashboard. I'm falling in love with you too. God help me, I do. But I'm terrified that loving you means becoming someone I'm not. I would never ask you to change. Daniel's voice went fierce. I love you exactly as you are. The woman who sabotages dates with stained sweatshirts. The woman who splits the check even though it embarrasses her pride. The woman who's brave enough to fight for what she wants, even when the whole world seems set against her. They kissed across the console, desperate and clumsy and real, and Emma tasted salt from her own tears. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it, but it buzzed again and again, insistent enough that she finally pulled it out. Unknown number, a text that made her blood run cold. You stood up to them. Impressive. But you should know, Ryan Harrison hired a PI to investigate you 3 weeks ago. He knows about Kyle, the debt, everything. Ask your boyfriend why he hasn't told you yet. Emma stared at the screen, showed it to Daniel without a word. She watched his face as he read it, watched understanding and then fury chase across his features. Emma, his voice was careful. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know Ryan hired a PI, but he did. Emma heard how flat her voice sounded. Your brother investigated me like I was a criminal, and you never thought to mention it. Because I didn't know. Daniel's grip tightened on her hand. Ryan did this without telling me. When I find out, when? Emma pulled her hand away. So you did know. Eventually. I found out a week ago. Daniel's face twisted. Ryan told me after that second article dropped. I was furious. I told him to destroy the report and never do something like that again. A week ago. Emma felt something crack in her chest. You've known for a week that your brother investigated me. That he dug into my finances, in my past, in my relationship with Kyle. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to figure out how to bring it up without making things worse. Emma laughed, a bitter sound that tasted like ashes. Daniel, your family investigated me like I'm some kind of threat. They know every detail of the worst period of my life, and you kept that from me because you were trying to protect me? That's what Kyle did. He protected me from knowing he was unemployed. He protected me from knowing he was forging my signature. And then he destroyed my life. Emma, please. Daniel reached for her hand again. This isn't the same thing, isn't it? Emma pulled away. You decided what I was allowed to know about my own life. You made choices about what information I could handle. How is that different? The silence in the car felt suffocating. Emma opened the door, stepped out into the cold Portland night. Daniel followed. I can't do this. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. I love you, but I can't live in a world where people investigate me to make sure I'm not a gold digger. Where your family sees me as a threat. Where even you keep secrets because you think I'm too fragile to handle the truth. Emma, don't do this. Daniel's voice cracked. Don't let Ryan's mistake destroy what we have. It's not just Ryan. Emma felt tears streaming down her face now, hot against her cold cheeks. It's your whole world. The judgment, the suspicion, the wealth that changes how everyone sees me. I don't belong in it, Daniel, and trying to belong is killing me. They stood on the overlook with Portland glittering below them, and Emma watched Daniel's face as he realized she was serious. That this was breaking had maybe been breaking since the first tabloid article, since the anonymous photos, since the moment she'd understood exactly how much money stood between them. So that's it? Daniel's voice went hollow. You're just giving up? I'm trying to survive. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. And I can't survive this. She called an Uber from her phone, stood in the cold waiting for it, while Daniel watched from 10 feet away like the distance was a canyon neither of them knew how to cross. When the car arrived, Emma looked back once. Daniel stood in the glow of the city lights, and even from a distance, she could see the devastation on his face. What Emma didn't know as the Uber carried her home through snow-dusted streets was that Ryan's investigation had uncovered more than just her debt. The PI had found Kyle Brennan in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, living under an assumed name with a new girlfriend he was systematically defrauding, had documented his pattern across 3 states, 7 women, over $200,000 in fraud, had gathered enough evidence that federal prosecutors would be very interested in a case involving wire fraud cross state lines. And Ryan was about to make a decision that would either save Emma's faith in the Harrison family or destroy it completely. Emma curled up on her couch with Sherlock purring against her chest and cried until she couldn't breathe, until the sky outside her window started to lighten with dawn, and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice, even as her heart felt like it was breaking apart behind her ribs. 2 months stretched like years. Emma threw herself into work with the kind of desperation that looked like dedication if you didn't look too closely. Teaching during the day, stocking shelves at Target 3 evenings a week, weekend tutoring sessions where she helped high schoolers through algebra they'd probably never use. Every spare dollar went straight to the debt, $1,500 in March, $1,800 in April. And watching the number tick down felt like the only victory she was allowed. Her apartment became smaller, lonelier. Sherlock followed her from room to room like he knew something was broken and didn't understand why she couldn't fix it. Sarah visited every Thursday with Thai food and concern. Emma couldn't meet head-on, talking around the Daniel-shaped absence in every conversation until Sarah finally gave up trying to be subtle. You're both miserable. Sarah sat cross-legged on Emma's worn couch, carton of pad thai going cold in her hands. What are you waiting for? Proof that this can work. Emma stared at her own untouched food, that I won't wake up one day and realize I've lost myself trying to fit into his world. You stood up to his entire family at dinner. You told off a billionaire for keeping secrets. Sarah's voice went fierce. You're the least lost person I know. The question isn't whether you can fit into his world, it's whether he's worth building a new world together. Emma didn't have an answer for that, so she changed the subject and pretended not to notice Sarah's disappointment. The school year ended in a blur of standardized tests and field day chaos. Emma watched her third graders graduate to fourth grade and felt the familiar ache of letting go, of watching children she'd poured herself into walk away toward teachers who'd never know what these kids had needed at 8 years old. One student gave her a card with crayon flowers and shaky handwriting. Thank you for being the best teacher. I'll miss you. Emma cried in her empty classroom after the last bus pulled away, surrounded by bare walls and the ghost of a year she'd survived through force of will. Her phone stayed mercifully quiet. Daniel texted once every few days, simple messages that asked for nothing. Thinking of you. Hope you are well. Saw a bookstore cat today that reminded me of Sherlock. Emma read each one 3 times and never responded, her thumb hovering over the keyboard before she locked the screen and went back to whatever distraction she'd been using to avoid thinking about dark eyes and dimpled smiles. Daniel's life narrowed to 2 things, Lily and work. The work part was easy. He'd been using business to avoid feelings since Rebecca died, and the muscle memory of conference calls and acquisition strategies came back like breathing. 16-hour days, deals closed with the kind of ruthless efficiency his competitors had learned to fear. The Lily part destroyed him. His daughter asked for Emma every single day. During breakfast, can we call Ms. Reed? During the drive to summer camp, does Ms. Reed still like me? At bedtime, when she was supposed to be sleeping, Daddy, did I make Ms. Reed leave? No, sweetheart. Daniel sat on the edge of Lily's bed, her small hand clutched in his much larger one. Miss Reed didn't leave because of you. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings. Did Uncle Ryan make her sad? Yes. Daniel couldn't lie to those eyes, Rebecca's eyes looking at him with too much understanding. Uncle Ryan made a big mistake. Can't you fix it? Lily's voice went small. You always fix things. Daniel had no answer that wouldn't break both their hearts. So he kissed her forehead and stayed until she fell asleep, her face still troubled, even in rest. He and Ryan didn't speak for 3 weeks, the longest silence in their lives, a gulf of anger and betrayal that widened every time Daniel saw Lily's red-rimmed eyes. Ryan tried once, a knock on Daniel's office door, an attempt at conversation that died when Daniel told him to get out in a voice so cold Ryan actually flinched. Catherine flew in from California without warning, appearing at Daniel's penthouse on a Tuesday morning like an avenging angel in Chanel. You look terrible. She swept past him into the living room, taking in the dishes in the sink and Lily's toys scattered across the floor. Where's Mrs. Chen? Day off. Daniel closed the door. What are you doing here? Your brother called me. Catherine settled onto the couch with the kind of authority that came from raising 2 boys alone after her husband died. He's worried about you. Ryan can fuck off. Language. Catherine's voice cracked like a whip, though I don't disagree with the sentiment. She studied him with eyes that missed nothing. You're in love with her. The teacher. Emma, yes, and you let your brother's paranoia drive her away. Daniel felt anger flare hot and immediate. I didn't let Ryan do anything. He investigated her without my knowledge. But you kept it secret once you knew. Catherine's voice went gentle, which was somehow worse than her anger. You chose protection over honesty, just like you did after Rebecca died, when you built walls so high even your own daughter couldn't always reach you. The truth of it landed like a physical blow. Daniel sat down hard in the nearest chair. So what do I do? His voice came out broken. She won't answer my calls, won't respond to texts. I've lost her. You fight for her. Catherine leaned forward. You prove that loving you doesn't mean losing herself. You show her you can be a true partner, not a savior with the checkbook. And you start by fixing what Ryan broke. How? Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolled, handed it to him. That's Emma's schedule. 3 jobs, working herself into exhaustion, paying off debt that was never hers to begin with. Daniel stared at the screen, saw tutoring sessions and target shifts and the weight of other people's mistakes crushing someone he loved. You can't solve this with money. Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. But you can give her the tools to solve it herself. Talk to Ryan. Make him understand what his fear cost everyone. Ryan's guilt tasted like ash and regret, flavors he'd never developed a tolerance for in 40 years of being right about most things. He sat in his home office while his wife Jessica stood in the doorway with crossed arms and a look that suggested his comfort was the least of her concerns. You need to fix this. I was trying to protect him. Ryan's defense sounded weak even to his own ears. By destroying his happiness? Jessica's voice carried the kind of disappointment that hurt more than anger. By treating a good woman like a criminal? Ryan, I've watched you be calculating in business for 10 years, but this was cruel. I didn't mean... Intent doesn't matter, Jessica cut him off. Impact does. Daniel won't speak to you. Lily won't look at you during family dinners. And Emma's working 3 jobs while you sit here feeling sorry for yourself. Ryan looked at the private investigator's report on his desk. Emma's entire life reduced to 40 pages of financial records and background checks. The debt Kyle had left her, the 3 years of payments, the 2nd and 3rd jobs just to stay afloat. The other victims the PI had found, women in Seattle and Sacramento and Denver, a pattern of fraud that made Ryan's stomach turn. He'd been wrong, completely, catastrophically wrong, and he had no idea how to fix it. Jessica came further into the room, sat on the edge of his desk. You have connections in federal law enforcement. Make them useful. Ryan met his wife's eyes. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you stop trying to protect Daniel from getting hurt and start helping Emma get justice. She deserves that much. The idea took root slowly, terrifying in its simplicity. Ryan opened his laptop and started making calls. Emma was leaving Lincoln Elementary after a particularly brutal tutoring session, a high school junior who'd rather scroll Instagram than learn derivatives, when she saw the Mercedes parked in the teacher's lot. Ryan Harrison leaned against it in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, and every instinct Emma had screamed to keep walking. She stopped 3 feet away. What are you doing here? I owe you an apology. Ryan straightened but didn't move closer. A real one, not the corporate kind where I'm sorry becomes, I apologize if you were offended. Emma crossed her arms, exhaustion making her too tired for politeness. I'm listening. I hired the investigator because I was trying to protect my brother. Ryan's voice was steady, but his eyes held something that might have been shame. Victoria hurt him badly 2 years ago, sold private information to tabloids, made his life hell for months. I swore I'd never let anyone do that again. So you assumed I was like her. I assumed everyone was like her. Ryan pulled out his phone, handed it to her. That's the report I commissioned. Everything the investigator found. Emma took the phone with shaking hands, saw her life laid bare. Bank statements, credit reports, court filings from the Kyle situation, even copies of her tax returns. 40 pages of her privacy violated and packaged for Ryan's consumption. You had no right. Her voice came out flat. I didn't. You're correct. I violated your privacy because I'm paranoid and overprotective and couldn't see past my own fear to recognize that Daniel loves you and you genuinely care about him. Emma handed back the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because I found something else. Ryan pulled up another file. Kyle Brennan is in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, living under the name Kevin Brennan. He's scamming another woman, Ashley Morrison, 29, a nurse, and he's done this before. Ryan showed her photos, Kyle with different women in different cities, surveillance shots from the investigator's comprehensive work, Seattle 3 years before Emma, Sacramento 2 years before that. A pattern of fraud stretching back almost a decade. 7 women total, over $200,000 in combined fraud. He crosses state lines, which makes it federal wire fraud. Emma stared at the photos, saw her own pain reflected 7 times over in strangers' faces. That son of a bitch. I have connections at the FBI. Ryan's voice went careful. Financial Crimes Division. If you're willing to testify, provide documentation, they can build a case. Extradition from Mexico is complicated, but possible with federal charges. Emma looked up sharply. Why would you help me? Because I was wrong about you. Ryan's voice carried something that sounded like genuine remorse. You're not with Daniel for his money. If anything, his wealth makes your life harder. You work 3 jobs to pay off debt. That wasn't your fault, while my brother is miserable, and my niece cries herself to sleep asking why you left. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, forced them back. I didn't leave because of Kyle's debt. I left because loving Daniel felt like losing myself. I understand that now. And I'm sorry I made it worse. They stood in the empty parking lot while June's son beat down and Emma tried to decide if she believed him. Ryan's expression held none of the calculations she'd seen at that disastrous dinner. Just exhaustion and regret and what might have been hope. Okay, her voice came out steadier than she felt. Connect me with your FBI contacts, not for Daniel, for all the women Kyle hurt. Ryan nodded, thank you. And Emma, my brother loves you. He's been miserable for 2 months. If there's any part of you that still cares about him, don't let my mistake be the reason you walk away. Emma didn't answer because she couldn't, not without admitting how much she missed Daniel's voice and Lily's laughter and the version of herself she'd been when love felt possible instead of terrifying. The FBI agent's name was Lisa Tran, mid-40s with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. They met in a coffee shop downtown, not the one where Emma had first met Daniel. She couldn't handle that. And Agent Tran laid out what a federal case would require. Your testimony, documentation of the fraud, cooperation with the investigation, which means possibly months of interviews and depositions. Emma spread her own documents across the table. 3 years of carefully organized proof that Kyle had destroyed her credit and disappeared. Credit card statements, loan paperwork, forged signatures she'd testified to in small claims court that went nowhere. Agent Tran reviewed everything with the kind of attention Emma had spent years wishing someone in authority would pay. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from professional interest to righteous anger. Ms. Hartley, this is textbook wire fraud. Multiple victims across state lines, clear pattern of behavior, digital evidence. With your cooperation and the information Mr. Harrison's investigator provided, we can build a solid case. How long? 6 to 12 months for investigation and extradition. Federal trials move slowly, but Kyle Brennan won't be running this scam on anyone else. Emma signed the cooperation agreement with hands that only trembled slightly. Watched Agent Tran pack up the documents that would finally force Kyle to face consequences for what he'd done. Outside the coffee shop, Emma called Ryan. He answered on the first ring. I signed with the FBI. Her voice was steady. Thank you for making this possible. You're welcome. A pause. Emma, have you talked to Daniel? No, he misses you. Lily asks about you every day. Emma closed her eyes against the ache in her chest. I miss them too, but missing someone isn't enough to fix what's broken. What would be enough? Time, trust, proof that loving him doesn't mean erasing myself. Give him a chance to prove that. Ryan's voice went soft. My brother isn't perfect, but he loves you enough to let you find your own way. That's worth something. Emma ended the call and stood on the sidewalk watching Portland move around her. People with destinations and certainty. Lives that made sense in ways hers didn't anymore. Her phone buzzed. Daniel's name on the screen, a text that made her breath catch. Heard from Ryan, you're working with FBI on Kyle case. I'm proud of you. No expectations. Just wanted you to know. Emma stared at the message until her vision blurred. Typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on the simplest truth. Thank you. 3 weeks later, sitting in her apartment at 2 a.m. because sleep wouldn't come, Emma's phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen and her finger hit accept before her brain caught up. Emma, just her name, and she heard everything in it, relief and longing and the kind of careful hope that came from being hurt too many times. Hi, her voice came out smaller than intended. I know it's late. I saw your light on from the street. His words came faster. I wasn't stalking you. I was just driving, and I looked up and saw your window and thought, maybe you were awake and might want to talk. You were outside my apartment at 2 a.m.? Pathetic, I know. A rusty laugh. But I miss you, Emma. Lily misses you, and I needed to hear your voice even if you hung up immediately. Emma walked to her window, looked down at the street, saw his car parked under the broken streetlight, a dark shape in the shadows. I miss you too. The admission cost her something. But missing each other doesn't fix the problems. Can I come up? 5 minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I will. Emma buzzed him in before she could reconsider. spent the 3 minutes it took him to reach her door, trying to remember how to breathe normally. When she opened the door, Daniel looked like hell, shadows under his eyes, clothes rumpled, hair disheveled in ways that suggested he'd been running his hands through it for hours. But his eyes, when they met hers, held so much raw feeling that Emma's careful defenses started cracking. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, Sherlock immediately claiming Daniel's lap like the traitor cat he was. "I'm sorry," Daniel's voice was rough, "for Ryan's investigation, for not telling you immediately when I found out, for every way I failed to be the partner you deserved." Emma pulled her knees to her chest. "I'm sorry too, for shutting you out completely, for not giving you a chance to explain before I ran. I don't want to lose you." Daniel looked at her with such naked vulnerability it hurt. "But I also don't want it to be the reason you lose yourself. So tell me what you need. What would make this work?" Emma took a shaky breath. "I need to handle my debt myself, all of it. No loans, no gifts, no making it disappear. I need to know I can stand on my own even while standing beside you." "Done. What else? I need you to trust me with the hard truths. Even when you think you're protecting me, especially then. I need to be a partner who knows what's happening, not someone you shelter from reality." "I can do that." Daniel's hand twitched like he wanted to reach for her, but didn't. "Anything else? I need time. To rebuild trust. To figure out how to love you without fear swallowing me whole." "I'll wait as long as it takes." Daniel's voice was steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I love you. Not in spite of the complications. Because of who you are when facing them." Emma felt tears start to fall, hot tracks down her cold face. "I love you too. God, I've been miserable without you. So can we try again? Slowly, carefully, however you need it to look?" "Yes." The word came out on a sob. "Yes, we can try." Daniel crossed the couch and pulled her into his arms, and Emma let herself break open against his chest while he held her like she was something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. They spent the rest of the night talking about boundaries and expectations, about how to navigate his wealth without it consuming her identity, about Lily, and whether Emma was ready to be part of a child's life again after walking away once. By the time dawn broke through Emma's curtains, they'd rebuilt something fragile but real. Not the effortless romance of their first 2 months, but something harder won and possibly stronger for it. Daniel left at sunrise with a kiss that tasted like new beginnings and old hope. Emma watched his car pull away and felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of choice. Her phone rang an hour later. Catherine Harrison's number. "Emma?" Catherine's voice was brisk. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I have a proposition for you." What neither Daniel nor Emma knew as they began the careful work of rebuilding trust was that Catherine had made a decision that would either solve their biggest problem or create an entirely new one. She'd established a foundation to help teachers facing financial hardship, and Emma Hartley was about to receive a consulting offer that would pay exactly $85,000, with benefits that looked suspiciously like a wealthy mother-in-law's attempt to remove every obstacle between her son and the woman he loved. Whether Emma would accept help that looked like charity or recognize it as the kind of support partners gave each other when love meant building something together instead of surviving separately, remained to be seen. Catherine's proposition arrived via email the morning after Emma and Daniel reconciled. Formal letterhead in legal language that took 3 readings before Emma understood what she was looking at. The Cross Family Foundation, newly established Catherine as chair, was creating an educational support program for teachers facing financial crises. They needed a consultant with firsthand experience to design the framework, establish eligibility criteria, develop outreach strategies. Compensation, $85,000. Signing bonus, $85,000, payable immediately. Emma stared at the numbers until they stopped looking like coincidence and started looking like exactly what they were. A solution wrapped in professional language. Catherine's way of removing every obstacle between Daniel and happiness without making it look like charity. The phone rang before Emma could decide how she felt about any of it. "Before you say no." Catherine's voice carried steel beneath silk. "This is legitimate work. I've been planning this foundation since my husband died 20 years ago, but I never had someone with the right expertise to launch it properly. You have that expertise. You've lived through financial fraud, rebuilt your credit, worked multiple jobs while maintaining your career. You know what teachers need because you are what teachers need. It's the exact amount of my debt. Emma's voice came out flat. That's not a coincidence. No, it's strategic. Catherine didn't apologize for it. I'm offering you a job that pays what you're worth while simultaneously solving a problem that's destroying your relationship with my son. If you want to view that as manipulation, that's your choice. But Emma, sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's recognizing that life is easier when we stop trying to prove we can survive alone. Emma walked to her window, watched Portland wake up under summer sun that felt too bright for the weight she carried. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. But know this, I'm not offering because you're dating Daniel. I'm offering because you're the right person for this work. What you do with the compensation is your business entirely. After Catherine hung up, Emma sat on her floor with Sherlock purring against her legs and tried to untangle pride from principle. She'd spent 3 years proving she could pay back every dollar Kyle stole. 3 years of Target shifts and weekend tutoring and choosing between groceries and gas money. 3 years building a wall of self-sufficiency so high that asking for help felt like admitting defeat. But this wasn't asking. This was being offered meaningful work at fair compensation by someone who happened to be her boyfriend's mother and happened to have chosen a salary that matched Emma's debt down to the dollar. She called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Your mother offered me a job. I know. A pause. She called me after she emailed you. Wanted to make sure I understood this was her decision, not mine. That I wasn't to influence you either way. $85,000, Daniel. Emma heard her voice crack. The exact amount. She's not subtle. Something that might have been a smile in his tone. But Emma, she's not wrong either. You'd be perfect for this work. You've spent 3 years living what this foundation is trying to address. And if the salary happens to solve your debt problem, it feels like cheating. Like taking a shortcut after I've come so far on my own. You've paid off over $25,000 in 3 years. Daniel's voice went fierce. On a teacher's salary while working 2 additional jobs. You've more than proven you can do this alone. But why should you have to? Why is suffering noble when partnership is available? Because accepting help from your family feels like proving everyone right. That I'm with you for access to money and opportunities I couldn't get on my own. Anyone who knows you knows that's bullshit. Daniel's language sharpened with frustration. Emma, you dress down on purpose. You insist on splitting checks. You work yourself to exhaustion rather than accept a loan. You're the least mercenary person I've ever met. Taking a legitimate consulting position doesn't change that. Emma closed her eyes. What if I'm not good enough? What if I take this job and fail and prove I was only hired because I'm dating you? Then you fail and we figure out what's next. But Emma, you don't get to use fear of failure as an excuse to keep punishing yourself for Kyle's crimes. The truth of it landed hard. Emma had been punishing herself. 3 years of penance for being stupid enough to trust someone who'd betrayed her. 3 years of proving she could survive the consequences of someone else's choices. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start living. Okay. The word came out steadier than Emma felt. I'll take the job. But I'm using the signing bonus to pay off the debt completely. Every dollar. And if the work isn't up to standard, I want honest feedback. Deal. Relief flooded Daniel's voice. When do you start? Emma pulled up the contract again. August 1st. I have the rest of summer to finish my Target shifts and tutoring commitments. You're giving notice at Target? I'm giving notice at everything except teaching. Just teaching and the foundation work. Normal hours. Normal life. The concept felt foreign. Going home after school ended, evenings free, weekends without shifts. Emma had forgotten what that kind of space felt like. 2 weeks later, Emma sat in her bank's parking lot with her phone showing a balance she'd worked 3 years to see. The signing bonus had cleared that morning. She'd transferred $85,000 to the loan servicer in a single payment, watched the debt counter drop to 0 for the first time since Kyle had left. Emma cried in her car for 20 minutes, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Relief and grief tangled together. Relief that the weight was gone. Grief for 3 years spent under its crushing pressure. She'd survived. She'd won. She'd proven to herself and everyone else that Emma Hartley could rebuild from rubble and come out whole. Daniel found her there, still crying, makeup destroyed and eyes red. He'd known somehow, probably tracked the payment like he tracked everything that mattered, and he didn't say a word. Just opened her car door and pulled her into his arms while she fell apart against his chest. "I did it." Her voice came out broken. "It's done. I'm free. You've always been free." Daniel's hand moved through her hair, gentle and grounding. The debt was just a number. You were never defined by it. But Emma had been defined by it, shaped by 3 years of paying for someone else's theft. And now the shape of her life could change, stretch into spaces she'd denied herself. That evening, Daniel took Emma and Lily to dinner. Nothing fancy, just a pizza place Lily loved where the staff knew to bring crayons without asking. Lily sat between them, coloring princesses and chattering about summer camp, her small hand reaching for Emma's periodically like she needed to confirm Emma was real and staying. Mama Emma. The name slipped out casually, and Lily's eyes went wide with horror. "I mean, Ms. Reed, I'm sorry. I know you're not my mom. Emma's heart cracked open. "Sweetie, it's okay. You can call me whatever feels right." Lily looked at Daniel for confirmation. He nodded and Lily's face transformed into pure joy. "Mama Emma," she tested the name again. "Is that okay? Because you're not my first mama who's in heaven, but you're my mama who's here. I would be honored to be your Mama Emma." Lily launched herself into Emma's arms with enough force to nearly knock her off the bench seat, and Emma held this child who'd lost one mother and chosen another, and felt the last piece of herself that had been holding back finally surrender. Daniel watched them with eyes that held everything, love and loss and hope rebuilt from disaster. His hand found Emma's across the table and squeezed once, a promise neither of them needed to speak aloud. The foundation work consumed Emma's August in the best possible way. She met with teachers from across Oregon, documented their stories of medical debt and student loans, and the thousand small financial crises that plagued people who'd chosen service over salary. She designed intake forms and eligibility criteria, built partnerships with credit counseling services and legal aid organizations. She hired a small staff, 2 other teachers who'd survived their own financial disasters, and together they created something that felt like purpose. Catherine oversaw everything with the kind of attention that came from genuine investment rather than obligation. She challenged Emma's assumptions, pushed back on ideas that didn't scale, championed the work to donors with the kind of passion that opened wallets. "You're good at this." Catherine handed Emma a revised budget proposal covered in her neat handwriting. "Better than I anticipated. You understand systemic problems in ways most consultants never grasp." I lived them. Emma reviewed the changes, saw Catherine had increased funding for legal services. "This is good. Teachers facing fraud need lawyers who understand financial crimes." "Exactly." Catherine leaned back in her chair. "Emma, I want to offer you something beyond the initial contract. Full-time director position, salary commensurate with experience, full benefits, autonomy to build this program however you see fit." Emma's breath caught. "I'm a teacher. That's my career. You'll still teach." Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact. "Part-time, 3 days a week. Lincoln Elementary already agreed to the arrangement. You'd teach Monday through Wednesday, run the foundation Thursday and Friday." Best of both worlds. Why? Emma searched Catherine's face for ulterior motives. "Why invest this much in me?" "Because you're going to marry my son." Catherine's directness was startling. "And because you're brilliant at work that matters. I don't waste talent, Emma, not even when it comes gift-wrapped in a relationship I initially mistrusted." Emma felt something shift, a final piece of acceptance clicking into place. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes, or say you need time to think." "But Emma, stop questioning whether you deserve opportunities. You've earned everything you have." The school year started with Emma teaching 3 days a week and running the foundation 2 days, a balance that felt sustainable in ways her previous life never had. Her classroom filled with new third graders, fresh faces with their own stories, and Emma poured herself into teaching with energy she'd lacked when exhaustion was her baseline. Daniel picked her up after school on Wednesdays, a routine that became sacred. They'd drive to Lily's school together, collect a chattering 6-year-old full of camp stories, head home to Daniel's penthouse where Emma now kept a drawer of clothes, and Sherlock had grudgingly accepted residence. They were building something. Not the whirlwind romance of their first 2 months, but something steadier. Partnership that meant shared decisions and combined efforts, and the kind of trust that came from surviving the worst and choosing each other anyway. October brought Kyle's extradition. Agent Tran called Emma on a Thursday afternoon, her voice carrying satisfaction. "We got him. Arrested in Playa del Carmen this morning. Federal marshals are flying him back to Portland tomorrow. Trial scheduled for March." Emma felt cold spread through her chest. "I'll have to testify?" "Yes. But Emma, we have 7 victims willing to testify. This case is airtight. Kyle Brennan will spend years in federal prison." The trial happened during spring break, March weather turning Portland gray and cold. Emma stood outside the federal courthouse in a navy suit Catherine had helped her choose. Professional's armor for facing the man who destroyed her credit and disappeared. Daniel sat in the gallery, Ryan beside him for once. Sarah squeezed Emma's hand before she took the stand, and Agent Tran gave her an encouraging nod. Kyle looked older, softer around the edges, his tan faded in federal custody. When Emma walked past him to the witness stand, he didn't meet her eyes. The prosecution walked her through everything. The relationship, the discovery that Kyle was unemployed, the forged credit applications and loan documents, the morning she'd woken to find him gone, and her savings account emptied. Emma's voice stayed steady through all of it. 3 years of distance turning pain into facts she could recite without breaking. The defense tried to paint her as complicit, suggested she must have known what Kyle was doing. Emma met the lawyer's eyes and let her answer come through clear and cold. "I trusted the man I was engaged to marry. That's not complicity. That's being human." 6 other women testified over 3 days. Seattle, Sacramento, Denver, Phoenix, 2 from California. A pattern so clear even Kyle's expensive lawyer couldn't obscure it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kyle got 8 years federal prison. Emma watched the marshals lead him away in handcuffs and felt nothing but relief that this chapter was finally, completely closed. Outside the courthouse, Daniel pulled her into his arms while press photographers captured them together. No hiding now, no pretending their relationship was anything but solid and real. "It's over." Emma's voice came out steady. "He can't hurt anyone else. You were incredible in there." Daniel pulled back enough to look at her. "Brave and honest, and everything I love about you." Emma kissed him right there on the courthouse steps. Propriety be damned, and felt the last weight of Kyle's betrayal lift into Portland's gray sky. June arrived with the kind of sunshine that made Oregon residents forget 8 months of rain. Daniel had been planning something for weeks. Emma could tell by the way he got secretive about his phone, the way Lily giggled when Emma asked about weekend plans. Saturday morning, Daniel announced they were going to Cannon Beach. Just the 3 of them, a day by the ocean, nothing fancy. Emma packed swimsuits and sunscreen, made sandwiches because old habits died hard, and spending money on beach food still felt wasteful. They drove 2 hours with Lily singing along to radio pop, Daniel's hand on Emma's knee, windows down and salt air pouring in. The beach house Daniel's family owned sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, modest by Billionaire standards, but still stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, weathered cedar siding, a deck that hung over crashing waves. Rebecca and I bought this before Lily was born. Daniel helped Emma unload bags, his voice careful around his late wife's name. "It's the only place that still feels like her without hurting." "I'm glad you kept it." Emma meant it. Rebecca deserved to be remembered in beautiful places. They spent the afternoon building sandcastles with Lily, the little girl directing construction with the kind of authority that suggested future CEO material. Daniel and Emma followed orders, digging moats and shoring up walls while Lily placed seashells like precious jewels. The tide came in slowly, waves creeping closer to their elaborate fortress. Lily watched the water with 6-year-old philosophy. "Nothing lasts forever." Her voice went solemn. "But that's okay because we can build new castles tomorrow." Emma and Daniel exchanged glances over Lily's head. Such wisdom from someone still losing baby teeth. Evening brought cooler air in a sunset that painted the sky in shades of fire. Daniel suggested a walk, just the adults, and Mrs. Chen appeared from the house to watch Lily with the kind of timing that suggested conspiracy. They walked south along the beach, waves rushing over their bare feet, Emma's hand tucked into Daniel's like it belonged there. He was nervous. Emma could feel it in the tension of his shoulders, see it in the way he kept starting to speak and stopping. "You okay?" She bumped his shoulder with hers. Terrified, actually. Daniel stopped walking, turned to face her with the sunset at his back. "Emma, these past 9 months have been the hardest and best of my life. Losing you, getting you back, learning how to be partners instead of just people in love." Lily appeared on the beach ahead of them, clearly visible when she was supposed to be in the house. She ran toward them, waving something that caught the light. "Look what I found!" Lily skidded to a stop, holding out a small box covered in damp sand. Daniel shot his daughter a look that was half exasperation, half amusement. "You were supposed to wait for my signal. You were taking too long." Lily handed the box to Emma with utmost seriousness. "This is for you, from Daddy, and from me too because I helped pick it." Emma's hands shook as she opened the box. Inside, nestled in white silk, sat a sapphire ring surrounded by small diamonds. Her favorite color. Elegant without being ostentatious. Perfect in ways that made her eyes sting with tears. Daniel dropped to one knee in the wet sand, Lily standing beside him with clasped hands like she was praying. Emma Hartley. 2 years ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You taught Lily about resilience and me about vulnerability. You stood up to my family, survived tabloid scrutiny, rebuilt yourself after betrayal, and somehow still found room in your heart for a widower with a complicated daughter and more money than sense. Lily giggled at that, and Daniel smiled before continuing. "I've been in love before. I know what it looks like, feels like, costs. I know love doesn't solve problems. It creates new ones. But Emma, you make every problem worth solving. You make me want to be better, softer, more present. You make Lily laugh in ways she hasn't since Rebecca died. You make our house feel like home instead of just the place where we sleep." Lily tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Tell her the best part." "Right." Daniel's voice thickened with emotion. "Lily and I have been a team of 2 for a long time, but we'd like to be a team of 3, officially, permanently, with paperwork and witnesses and promises that last forever. Will you marry me? Not because I can give you financial security. You've proven you don't need that. Not because I have resources that might make your life easier, but because I love you exactly as you are, and I want to build a life together where we choose each other every single day." Lily added her own plea. "Please say yes, Mama Emma. I already told my friends at camp you're going to be my real mama." Emma was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face while sunset painted everything gold. "Yes." The word came out choked. "Yes, absolutely yes." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, like he'd measured somehow, and stood to kiss her while Lily cheered and jumped in the surf. Emma tasted salt from the ocean and her own tears and Daniel's smile, and thought that happiness had never felt quite so much like coming home. That night after Lily fell asleep, Daniel and Emma sat on the deck watching moonlight on waves. Emma twisted the ring on her finger, still not quite believing it was real. 1-year engagement, her voice was firm. "I want time to plan properly, to let this feel real, to not rush into something we might regret." 6 months, Daniel countered. "I've waited long enough, and you know this is right." 8 months, Emma leaned against him. "December wedding, Christmas lights, in winter beauty. Deal." Daniel kissed the top of her head. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, under 100 people. Emma already had opinions. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that feels like we're showing off. "You're going to be a beautiful bride." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other's rhythms and trusting the quiet between words. Emma thought about the coffee shop where they'd met, her ratty sweatshirt and defensive attitude. The way Daniel had looked at her like she was exactly what he'd been hoping to find. She thought about the months of tabloid speculation and family interrogation, Ryan's investigation and her own stubborn pride. She thought about crying in her car the day the debt zeroed out, testimony at Kyle's trial, Lily's small hand reaching for hers across pizza shop tables. All of it had led here, to a ring on her finger and a man who loved her mess and a child who'd chosen her as family. Emma had spent 3 years proving she could survive alone. Now she got to spend the rest of her life proving that surviving together was better. The wedding happened on a Saturday in mid-December, Portland dressed in holiday lights and the first real cold snap of winter. Emma had wanted small and intimate. They'd compromised on 80 guests in a private room at an art museum. Walls hung with impressionist paintings and windows overlooking the city. Sarah stood as maid of honor, wiping tears through the entire ceremony. Ryan gave Daniel away with a speech about being wrong and learning to recognize grace when it appeared in ratty sweatshirts. Catherine sat in the front row beside Emma's parents, her expression softer than Emma had ever seen it. Lily served as flower girl and ring bearer both. Taking her duties so seriously, she whispered the entire processional to avoid messing up. Her white dress came from Catherine, and she'd insisted on wearing sneakers underneath because heels were for grown-ups who made bad choices. Emma walked down the aisle alone. Her father had offered, but this felt right, walking toward Daniel under her own power instead of being given away like property. Her dress was simple ivory silk, no veil, hair loose with small white flowers tucked behind her ear. She'd refused the designer gowns Catherine suggested, found this one at a boutique in Southeast Portland for $1,200. Still more than she'd ever spent on clothing, but hers and chosen and perfect. Daniel waited at the end of the short aisle in a classic black suit, and when he saw Emma, his entire face transformed into something that made her stumble slightly because nobody had ever looked at her like that. Like she was grace incarnate, like she was everything, like watching her walk toward him was the single most important moment of his life. They had written their own vows. Emma went first, her voice shaking but clear. Daniel, when we met, I was sabotaging my own happiness because I'd forgotten how to trust. You saw through the defensive walls and ratty sweatshirts to the person underneath. Someone who wanted to be loved but was terrified of the cost. You taught me that love doesn't have to mean losing yourself. That partnership means building something together instead of surviving separately. That accepting help isn't weakness when it comes from someone who respects your strength. She glanced at Lily, who was watching with rapt attention. Lily, I promise to love you like you're my own, to show up for school plays and help with homework, and always be honest even when the truth is hard. You're the daughter of my heart, and I'm honored you chose me. Back to Daniel, whose eyes were wet. Daniel, I promise to be your partner, not your responsibility, to challenge you when you need it and support you always, to remember that the best things in life can't be bought. They can only be built, one choice at a time, one day after another. I love you both more than words can hold. Daniel's vows came through steady despite the emotion behind them. Emma, you appeared in my life when I'd given up on feeling anything but grief and obligation. I was going through motions, work, parenting, existing. You taught me to live again. You showed Lily what it means to be loved by someone who chooses you every single day. You proved that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about showing up, being honest, fighting for what matters. His voice roughened. I promise to respect your independence while building our interdependence. To be honest, even when protection feels kinder. To remember that you don't need saving, you need a partner who sees your strength and stands beside it. I love you, Emma, for exactly who you are, for the woman who wore stained jeans on our first date and stood up to my family and rebuilt herself from nothing. You make me better. You make us better. And I promise to spend the rest of my life earning the gift of your trust. The officiant pronounced them married, and Daniel kissed Emma like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Lily cheered loud enough to startle everyone, and then their small crowd erupted in applause. The reception was everything Emma had wanted. Simple food, good wine, a playlist of songs that mattered. She danced with her father, who cried and told her he was proud. Daniel danced with Lily, who stood on his shoes like she had since she was 2. Ryan gave a surprisingly emotional speech about being wrong and learning to recognize family when it chose you. Sarah's speech was hilarious, taking credit for the entire relationship and demanding a baby be named after her. Catherine's toast was briefest and most impactful. To Emma, who taught this family that love means seeing people as they are, not as we wish them, Emmington. Who proved that strength comes in forms we don't always recognize. Who loved my son and granddaughter with enough courage to walk away when staying felt wrong, and enough grace to come back when the foundation was solid. Welcome to the family, officially. We're lucky to have you. Emma cried into her wine glass, and Daniel pulled her close while everyone else raised their glasses in agreement. They honeymooned in Oregon, Emma's insistence, wanting to explore her home state properly instead of jetting off somewhere exotic. A week at the coast, long walks on beaches where Lily found tide pools and Emma collected sea glass. They stayed in small bed and breakfasts, cooked their own meals, made love with windows open to the sound of crashing waves. Normal. That was the word Emma kept coming back to. This felt normal in the best possible way. Not glamorous or dramatic, just real and steady and right. 2 years passed in the kind of comfortable rhythm that came from building life together instead of surviving it. Emma taught 3 days a week, her third graders still the highlight of her professional life, and ran the foundation 2 days. The program had helped over 100 teachers in its first 18 months, providing legal assistance and financial counseling and emergency grants, but had kept people from drowning in debt the way Emma nearly had. Daniel had achieved something Emma would have thought impossible: work-life balance. He left the office by 6 most evenings, coached Lily's soccer team on Saturdays, took cooking classes with Emma on Sunday mornings because neither of them had learned as children, and Lily declared their initial attempts criminal. They'd bought a house in Portland's suburbs, not the penthouse, which felt too much like Daniel's old life, but a 4-bedroom craftsman with a yard where Sherlock could hunt squirrels and Lily could build fairy houses. Emma had insisted on paying half the mortgage despite Daniel's protests, and they'd compromised on her paying what felt fair based on her salary, while his money went into trusts for Lily and future children and charitable foundations that did real work. March brought an evening that started normally. Dinner cooked together, Lily's homework at the kitchen table, Daniel reading contracts while Emma graded papers. But Emma felt different, often ways she couldn't name, exhaustion that reached bone deep. Daniel noticed immediately. "You okay? You've been quiet all week, just tired." Emma marked another paper with more force than necessary, and nauseous. Might be coming down with something. Daniel's expression shifted into something careful. "How long have you been nauseous?" Emma thought back. "Week and a half, morning sickness mostly, though stomach flu usually." She stopped, met Daniel's eyes across their kitchen table, saw hope and fear war across his features. "Oh." The word came out small. They drove to the pharmacy together after Lily was asleep, Mrs. Chen staying with her like this was normal instead of potentially life-changing. Emma bought 3 different pregnancy tests because if she was doing this, she wanted to be absolutely sure. Daniel waited outside the bathroom door while Emma took all 3 tests, his nervous energy palpable through solid wood. Emma lined them up on the counter and watched as pink lines appeared one after another after another. Positive. All 3. Emma opened the door. Daniel stood there looking terrified and hopeful, and so much like the man who'd walked into that coffee shop 4 years ago that Emma's breath caught. "I'm pregnant." Saying it out loud made it real. "We're having a baby." Daniel pulled her into his arms, and Emma felt him shaking. "You're sure?" 3 tests, sure. Emma laughed, slightly hysterical. "We're going to have a baby, Daniel. Lily's going to be a big sister." They stood in their bathroom holding each other while the world rearranged itself around new possibilities. And Emma thought about sandcastles and promises and building things that lasted longer than one tide cycle. The family dinner where they announced happened in late March, Catherine hosting at her Portland house with Ryan's family present. Lily sat between Emma and Daniel, vibrating with the secret she'd known for a week. Catherine served dessert, chocolate cake from a bakery Lily loved, and Daniel cleared his throat for attention. "Emma and I have news." His hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. "We're pregnant. Baby's due in November." Catherine's face transformed into pure joy. Lily couldn't contain herself anymore, shouting, "I'm going to be a big sister," to anyone who'd listen. Ryan hugged Emma with genuine affection, whispered congratulations in her ear, along with an apology that felt 4 years overdue. Ryan's daughter, now 10, squealed about having a baby cousin to play with. Catherine cried elegant tears and immediately started planning a shower. Emma would have to tactfully scale back. That night, lying in bed with Daniel's hand on her still flat stomach, Emma thought about how far they'd come, from a coffee shop blind date to a family expanding in ways that felt miraculous. From defensive walls and ratty sweatshirts to vows and rings and babies who'd never know a time when their parents weren't choosing each other every day. Snow began falling outside their window. First snow of spring, unexpected and beautiful. Emma watched flakes catch the streetlight and thought about full circles, about how the best stories started and ended in the same weather, how everything old became new again if you waited long enough. Daniel's voice came soft in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything." Emma turned to face him. "That coffee shop, your fake mustache story, Lily's birthday party where I met your family and thought they'd hate me, the night I left and thought we were over, Kyle's trial, the day the debt zeroed out, this ring, that beach proposal. All of it led here. No regrets, not a single one." Emma meant it. Every hard part was worth this. They fell asleep tangled together while snow fell steadier outside, covering Portland in white. And Emma dreamed of sandcastles that somehow survived the tide, of love that looked like partnership instead of rescue, of building life together one choice at a time. The final scene came on a Tuesday in December, 3 years after that first coffee shop meeting. Emma stood at Lincoln Elementary after a particularly long parent-teacher conference, watching snow fall in the parking lot while she waited for Daniel to pick her up. A young teacher pulled in with a broken-down car, steam rising from the hood, visible distress on her face. Emma walked over to offer help, thinking about how Daniel had rescued her from a snowstorm years ago and how that single act of kindness had changed everything. Behind her, headlights cut through the snow, Daniel arriving right on time, Lily in the back seat already waving. Emma waved back, then turned to the stranded teacher. "Let me give you a ride. Need to call someone about your car?" The teacher's relief was palpable, and as Emma helped her into Daniel's car, Lily chattering in the back seat about her day, Daniel patient and kind to the stranger, Emma thought about cycles and circles and how sometimes the best thing you could do was pay forward the grace you'd received. Later, at home with Lily asleep and her hand on her growing belly, Emma watched snow fall over their Portland neighborhood and thought about everything she'd learned, about how the best things in life really couldn't be bought. They could only be built one choice at a time, one risk after another, one day of choosing love over fear. "They say every snowflake is different," Emma whispered it to the child growing inside her, to the husband sleeping beside her, to the daughter down the hall who'd chosen her as family. Every person, too. And sometimes the most broken ones create the most beautiful patterns when they finally melt together. She'd been broken when she met Daniel. He'd been broken too. But together they'd made something beautiful. Not because money solved their problems, not because love was easy, but because they'd chosen partnership over pride, connection over self-protection, building something real over protecting themselves from potential hurt. And now, watching snow fall on the city where their story began, Emma realized the greatest gift wasn't wealth or security or even love itself. It was the courage to accept all three when they arrived wearing ratty sweatshirts and carrying complicated daughters and more baggage than seemed survivable. Some things really did last longer than one tide cycle. You just had to be brave enough to keep building, even when the waves kept coming.